In 2005, in the shadowed hills far from the nearest town, a young woman was living alone in a weathered, creaking farmhouse, tending day and night to her ailing, elderly grandmother. The days blurred into one another, quiet, heavy, and slow. But it was the nights that felt especially cold, as if the wind itself carried something unnatural through the cracks in the old wooden walls. One late afternoon, the woman had drifted off into an uneasy nap in the living room. The dimming light filtered through the dusty windows, casting long, shifting shadows across the walls. All was still, until a sudden, blood-curdling scream shattered the silence. It wasn't the kind of scream born from a nightmare or confusion. It was raw, animalistic, terrified. She jolted awake, heart thudding in her chest, ears ringing from the intensity of the shriek. For a second, she didn't know where she was. Then instinct took over. She sprinted down the narrow hallway toward her grandmother's room, her bare feet slapping against the worn wooden floorboards that groaned with every step. When she reached the doorway, her breath caught in her throat. Her grandmother, usually so still, so feeble, was now curled beneath the quilt like a frightened child. The blankets were pulled tight over her face, trembling. Her frail hands clutched the fabric like it was the only thing keeping her from being pulled into the dark. The woman rushed to her side, kneeling beside the bed. "Grandma," she shouted, gripping her shoulders. "Grandma, what's wrong?" She shook her, gently at first, then harder. "Grandma, please!" It took several moments of frantic pleading before the older woman began to stir. Her breathing was erratic, eyes wide with a fear so intense it didn't seem to belong to someone who had lived nearly a century. Slowly, she pulled the covers from her face, her lips trembling, voice barely above a whisper. He was there," she rasped, staring toward the doorframe, "standing right there." The young woman turned, heart pounding, but there was nothing, just the faint shadows that danced with the evening light. Her grandmother's voice cracked. "Red! He was red all over! His eyes, they were burning!" The room felt colder now. The air seemed to press in around them. "I swear to you," the old woman continued, gripping her granddaughter's arm with surprising strength, "it was him. It was Satan." The young woman stared at her, stunned. Her grandmother, strong-willed, stubborn, and sharp even in her old age, had never once in her life spoken of seeing things. She wasn't senile. She wasn't prone to hallucinations. She had always been grounded, rational. But now, her eyes were wild, glistening with tears, locked on the space just beyond the door as though it might come back at any second. "I've never seen anything like it," she said, voice shaking. "But I know what I saw, and it was real as you." The silence that followed was suffocating. The house, once simply old and lonely, now felt sinister, its every creak and groan like a breath being held. The hallway behind them stretched darker than it should have been. The dusk no longer looked peaceful. It felt like something was still there, watching, waiting. A 67-year-old retired teacher arrived at the hospital one rainy October morning, her hands trembling as she clutched a worn tote bag and a spiral-bound notebook. There was something urgent in her voice as she spoke, not frantic, but firm, controlled, like someone desperately trying to stay tethered to reality. She insisted she wasn't losing her mind. Her voice was soft but unwavering as she described the visions, faces, strange and unnatural, that hovered in front of her at night and sometimes even during the day. They weren't fleeting shadows or flickers of light. No, these things watched her, studied her, with eyes that didn't blink. Odd-looking wasn't the right word for them. The way she described them was chilling. Faces stretched into an unnatural shape, long, horizontal, almost football-like. Each one had grotesquely large features, bulging eyes that followed her movements, ears that twitched as if listening, and jagged, toothy grins that looked far too wide for a human mouth. She said they didn't speak, they didn't make a sound, but somehow the silence was worse, because it wasn't passive, it was intentional, like they were holding their breath, waiting for her to react. The doctors ran every test they could think of: blood work, neurological scans, infection panels. Everything came back clean. She wasn't on any new medications. There were no signs of dementia, delirium, or psychosis. Her mind, by all standard measures, was intact. And yet, the visions continued. In the days leading up to her hospital visit, things had gotten so intense, so disturbing, that her family, visibly shaken, reached out to their local parish. They asked a priest if an exorcism might be necessary. The idea had always been absurd to them before, something out of fiction, but now it didn't seem quite so ridiculous. The woman herself had grown too afraid to sleep without all the lights on. Sometimes even that didn't help. The faces thrived in the light just as much as the dark. She had even taken to drawing them. In the notebook she brought with her, page after page was filled with sketches, distorted, warped faces, each more unsettling than the last. Some smiled, some scowled, some simply stared. And every one of them shared that same elongated shape, the same piercing eyes, the same eerie stillness that made them feel aware. Eventually, a specialist reviewed her case and gave a diagnosis: Charles Bonnet syndrome. The condition, while rare, was known to affect people with vision loss, especially older adults. It caused vivid, complex hallucinations. The key detail? They were strictly visual. There were no voices, no sounds, no physical sensations, just the sight of things that weren't really there. People with the syndrome often reported seeing bizarre images, miniature people, unfamiliar animals, even entire landscapes or cities that would appear for seconds or minutes at a time. But for this woman, it was the faces. Always the faces. The doctors assured her, gently but firmly, that what she was experiencing wasn't supernatural. It was a known neurological phenomenon. But she didn't look comforted. Because to her, the diagnosis didn't change one thing: the way those faces looked at her. The cold intelligence in their stare, the subtle changes in their expressions. how some of them seemed to react to her mood, to her fear, like they weren't just projections from her mind, but something else, something waiting for her to close her eyes. In 1995, a man named Toma Kata found himself swallowed by grief. His mother, his closest companion, had just passed away after a long, painful battle with cancer. In the days following her death, Toma withdrew from the world entirely. He locked himself inside his bedroom, refusing to eat, speak, or even respond to the knocks on his door. The curtains stayed drawn. The lights stayed off. The only sounds that escaped from the room were the creaks of the floorboards and the occasional muffled sobs that came late at night. Friends and neighbors said he looked hollow when they saw him last, like something vital had left his body the same day his mother did. Several days passed this way, the silence inside that room stretching longer, heavier. Then came the night everything changed. Toma jolted awake sometime after midnight. The room was still cloaked in darkness, save for the faintest silver glow of the moon slipping through the edges of the curtains. At first, he thought it was a dream, or maybe just another restless moment in a string of sleepless nights. But then he heard it. The unmistakable sound of wood creaking, slow and deliberate, like someone had just stepped onto the old floorboards near the door. The air in the room seemed to tighten, the silence becoming almost too silent, as if it were listening with him. He sat up slowly, his eyes adjusting to the dim light, and then, frozen in place, he saw her. His mother. She was standing in the doorway, still, silent, watching him. Her posture, her presence, it wasn't just a fleeting image or a trick of the mind. She looked exactly as he remembered her. The same house dress, the same soft eyes, the same expression of quiet sadness that she wore in her final days. Only now, her face seemed blank, her gaze locked onto his, and yet there was something distant in it, detached, as though she was looking through him. Toma's scream ripped through the quiet night, long, panicked, and blood-chilling. He didn't stop screaming, not even when the pounding came at the front door. It was his neighbors who had heard him. Shocked by the terror in his voice, they'd immediately called the police. By the time officers arrived and forced their way inside, they found Toma still curled in the corner of his room, trembling, eyes fixed on the empty doorway. His voice was hoarse, his breathing rapid. When they finally got him to speak, what he told them was simple and clear. "I saw her. She was standing right there." That was the account they gave to the hospital, and it was the same story he repeated over and over again. The doctors ran their tests. They checked for neurological abnormalities, psychological distress, even traces of any substances that might trigger hallucinations. But everything came back normal. There was no clinical explanation, no rational cause they could point to that might explain what he saw that night. And after that, he never saw her again. Or at least, that's what everyone says. This happened when I was really little, probably too young to understand what fear really was. And back then, it was just me and my mom. She was a single parent, always working hard, but no matter how busy or tired she was, she always made time to check on me at night. Usually, when she got up to go to the bathroom, she'd poke her head in just to make sure I was safe and sleeping. But this one night, something felt different. I remember waking up in the middle of the night. There was no sound, no obvious reason I should have stirred. But something about the room felt off, still, too still. And then I heard it. A soft, almost imperceptible sound coming from the direction of my closet. Not loud, not aggressive, just there. A faint creak, like a coat hanger shifting, or a shoe brushing across the floor. I sat up slowly, rubbing my eyes. That's when I noticed her, my mom, standing right at the foot of my bed. She gave me a small, playful wave, the kind that always made me smile. Her face looked calm, warm, the way it always did when she checked in on me. She said softly, "Go back to sleep." I remember nodding, already feeling safer just seeing her. She turned toward the closet, walked over slowly, and pulled the door open just a crack. Then, to my surprise, she stepped inside. Just stepped in, without another word. She didn't close the door completely behind her, though. She left it slightly ajar. The dim glow from the nightlight bathed the room in a soft yellow hue, and I could still see her face, specifically her eye, peeking out through the narrow opening of the closet door. She just stood there, watching me. I giggled. I don't know why. Maybe I thought it was a game. Maybe I thought she was being silly. I laughed like any little kid would. It didn't feel scary in the moment, just odd, strange enough to remember vividly, even now. And then, like nothing had happened, I laid back down and drifted off to sleep. The next morning, as I sat at the kitchen table, happily spooning cereal into my mouth, I asked casually, "Mom, why were you hiding in my closet last night?" She stopped mid-motion, her spoon hovering halfway between the cereal box and the bowl. She turned to me slowly, her face blank at first, but then it changed, confused, concerned, almost scared. "What do you mean?" she asked. "You know," I said, smiling. "Last night, you came in my room. You told me to go back to sleep. Then you went into my closet and peeked out at me." She stared at me, unblinking. Then, with a quiet voice, she said, "I didn't come into your room last night." I froze. She tried to rationalize it at first. Maybe someone had broken in, but the doors were locked, the windows were closed, nothing was missing. And eventually, she told herself and me that it must have just been a vivid dream, a trick of the imagination. But I still remember what I saw, the way she smiled, the way she watched me, the stillness of her body behind that slightly open door. Since that night, I've only had 2 other hallucinations. Neither of them were as vivid and definitely not as creepy. But nothing has ever come close to the feeling I had that night. The quiet, eerie certainty that something was in that closet, and it was watching me. I used to be a trucker. Late-night runs were part of the job, long, empty stretches of highway lit only by the faint glow of dashboard lights and the occasional flicker of a roadside sign. Most nights, I had my coffee. It was a routine, a lifeline. Without it, the road became something else entirely. But that night, I didn't have my coffee, and things weren't going well. The hum of the engine, the soft vibration through the seat, the monotonous rhythm of tires against asphalt, it all became a lullaby. My eyelids drooped more than once. Several times, I caught myself just barely in time. The truck would start drifting slightly off course, the tires brushing against the rumble strips on the edge of the highway, jolting me back awake. Each time, my heart would pound, hands tightening on the wheel, trying to shake the fog out of my head. I rolled the window down, let the cold night air sting my face, slapped my cheeks, anything to stay alert. Eventually, I thought I was pulling through, thought I had a grip again. That's when I saw it. Just ahead, a black figure, right in the middle of the road. No lights, no movement, just there, directly in my lane, unmoving, like it had been waiting for me. I swerved hard, adrenaline spiking like a lightning bolt through my chest. The truck groaned and leaned violently to the side. Tires screeched. The edge of the shoulder raced past in a blur. Somehow, I missed it. I don't even know how I managed to keep control of the truck, but when I finally brought it to a full stop, I just sat there, hands shaking, breath shallow. My chest felt like it was about to explode from the inside. I reached up and wiped the sweat off my brow, then instinctively glanced toward the left rearview mirror and froze. The figure was still there, standing in the middle of the road, perfectly still, perfectly dark. It didn't move, didn't flinch, just stood there, facing me. I'm not usually the type to confront anyone, especially not in the dead of night on a pitch-black stretch of highway. But some mix of fear, frustration, or adrenaline made me swing the door open and climb down from the cab. I stepped onto the pavement, boots crunching on gravel, ready to shout at whoever or whatever it was. But the road? Empty. Not a soul in sight. No car, no animal, no figure. Just miles of dark highway stretching behind me, silent and still. I stood there for a while, unsure if I was losing my mind or had just imagined the whole thing. But I knew what I saw. I felt the truck swerve. I saw the silhouette in the mirror. And then, nothing. I didn't stick around to try and explain it. I got back in the truck and took off fast. About 10 miles down the road, the exhaustion finally caught up to me. I pulled over at a wide shoulder, killed the engine, and passed out right there in the cab. Even now, I try to tell myself my mind was just playing tricks on me, that it was nothing more than sleep deprivation, a product of a tired brain running on fumes. But what I can't shake, what I still think about, is why my brain would conjure up something so unsettling, so vivid, so perfectly timed to the exact moment I thought I was pulling myself together. Why that image? And why did it feel like it was watching me leave? I was 30 years old at the time, never had trouble sleeping. In fact, I was what most people would call a heavy sleeper. Once I was out, I was out. I never had nightmares, never even tossed or turned much. But that Saturday morning changed everything. I had gone to bed late the night before, nothing out of the ordinary. Just one of those slow, quiet nights where time slips away. When I finally drifted off, it felt like any other night. Until I woke up. Or at least, I thought I woke up. Something was wrong immediately. I couldn't move, not even a twitch. My arms, legs, chest, frozen. It was like being locked inside my own body. Panic started to creep in, but the only thing I could control were my eyes. Just my eyes. My breathing felt shallow, like I was suffocating under invisible weight. I darted my gaze around the room, trying to find something, anything that made sense. And then I saw it. In the far corner of the room, cloaked in shadows, stood a man. No, not just a man. Something wrong, something twisted. He must have been at least 7 feet tall, towering and thin. His face was stretched into an inhuman expression, his mouth wide open and slit unnaturally at the corners, like someone had carved it into a permanent, bleeding smile. Thick, dark blood dripped slowly from the edges, glistening under the pale light. And in his hand, gripped tightly, was a large carving knife. The blade gleamed faintly, catching the light like a silent warning. My stomach dropped. I couldn't scream, couldn't blink. I just stared, my eyes burning, my heart pounding against the inside of my chest like it was trying to break out. Then he moved, but he didn't walk. He hovered. His feet never touched the ground. He glided slowly toward me, his limbs completely still. No sway, no motion, just this smooth, unnatural drift, like a marionette held up by something invisible. I could feel the mattress press against my back with every ounce of panic I couldn't release. He got closer, closer, until he was right at the edge of my bed, just inches from my face. I could see him now, up close. His eyes were dark, lifeless, hollow, like 2 burned-out holes. His skin looked sickly and tight, almost stretched too thin over bone. And then, for the first time, he moved. His arm, the one holding the knife, began to rise. Slowly, deliberately, he lifted the blade toward the ceiling. My breath caught in my throat. I knew what was coming. There was no doubt in my mind what he was about to do. My body screamed for me to move, to run, to scream, but I couldn't. So I did the only thing I could do. I closed my eyes. I clenched them shut and braced myself for the inevitable, every second stretching into an eternity. I lay there, trembling, counting my last moments. 10 seconds passed, then 20, 30, and still nothing. I opened my eyes. He was gone. Just like that. The corner of the room was empty. The knife, the hovering, the face, gone. And suddenly, like someone had released a switch, I could move again. I shot out of bed so fast I nearly stumbled. My heart was racing, sweat poured down my face, and my entire body was shaking. I ran to my parents, barely able to get the words out. I told them everything, every horrifying detail. They didn't laugh. They didn't brush it off. Instead, they looked at each other, then back at me, and calmly explained that what I had just experienced was something called sleep paralysis, a condition where the body remains locked in a sleep-like state while the mind wakes up, often accompanied by vivid, sometimes terrifying hallucinations. That explanation made sense, at least logically. But even now, years later, I still wonder. Because the fear I felt that morning, that man's face, that wasn't just a dream. It was real, and I can still see him, every grotesque detail, whenever I close my eyes for too long in the dark. Being a single mother with a 3-year-old son is already a heavy weight to carry, but working 2 jobs on top of that, it was exhausting in every possible way, emotionally, mentally, physically. I barely had time to breathe most days. Between the morning shift and the long evenings, I had to rely on a sitter to watch my little boy. It hurt, not being able to be there every second, but I didn't have a choice. Rent, groceries, diapers. Reality doesn't wait. My second job was a long drive from home, and some nights the exhaustion hit me hard. I'd catch myself blinking longer than I should. My vision would blur slightly. The soft hum of the car would lull me into this dangerous, half-sleep state behind the wheel. I knew it wasn't safe, so I did everything I could to keep myself awake, pinching the inside of my arm, rolling the windows down to let the cold air sting my skin, shaking my head, even singing out loud just to hear something. But that night was worse than usual. There were no lights on this stretch of highway, just pitch black nothingness ahead of me and behind me. The darkness was so complete, it felt like I was floating in it. That's when I heard it. Giggling. A soft, unmistakable giggle. His giggle. From behind me. I froze, heart stopping mid-beat. Slowly, I looked up into the rearview mirror. And there he was, my 3-year-old son, sitting in the middle of the back seat, smiling at me. His little legs swung just slightly off the edge of the seat, and he looked directly at me, like it was just another ride home. I slammed on the brakes, the tires screeching against the pavement as I jerked the wheel to the side. The car came to a halt with a shudder. My heart was hammering in my chest as I turned around and looked into the back seat. Empty. There was no one there, no car seat, no boy, just silence. 10 long seconds passed, me sitting there in the middle of a blacked-out highway, breathing like I'd just run a marathon, when my phone rang. I looked at the screen. It was the sitter. Hands shaking, I answered. Her voice came through in a panic. "I'm so sorry. He fell down the stairs. He broke his ankle. I've already called an ambulance. I didn't know what to do. I'm so sorry." That's all I needed to hear. I slammed the car back into gear and sped home, barely breathing the entire way. My mind was racing. My body was ice cold. The moment I walked through the hospital doors and saw him lying in that bed, teary-eyed but okay, was the moment I knew. This wasn't just exhaustion. It wasn't a hallucination. It was something else. To this day, I still can't explain what happened on that highway, but I saw my son's face. I heard him laugh, and I believe deep down that somehow, some part of me knew he was in danger. People can call it a coincidence, a trick of the mind, sleep deprivation. But I know better. Mothers have a sixth sense when it comes to their children, and that night, mine woke me up. This is, without question, the scariest thing that has ever happened to me. I live out in the country, not completely isolated, but definitely not suburban. It's quiet, peaceful most of the time. There are a decent number of neighbors nearby, just far enough that we don't see each other often, but close enough that we're never truly alone. That's what I told myself anyway. The woods stretch out in all directions around my property. Thick, dense trees that darken quickly after sunset, even on clear nights. It's beautiful during the day, but when the sun drops and the sky fades to black, those same trees turn into walls, hiding anything that might be out there. That night, I was home alone. Nothing new, just another quiet late evening. I was finishing up some dishes when I heard it. A scream. Not a playful shout, not a coyote yelping or an animal in the brush. It was human, raw, full of terror. It echoed faintly from somewhere deep in the woods. I froze, dish still in my hand. My heart skipped once, then pounded harder. I told myself it could have been anything. Maybe a neighbor's TV, a prank, someone messing around. But something didn't feel right. I grabbed my flashlight and stepped out into the backyard, barefoot on the cold porch wood. The sky above was dark, no moonlight to help. All the neighbors' homes were dark, lights out, curtains drawn. Everyone was asleep. The yard was dead silent. I aimed the flashlight out toward the trees and slowly swept it across the edge of the forest. At first, all I saw was the usual: thick bark, tangled branches, shadows. And then the beam landed on it. I froze. It was a figure, a tall one, taller than anything I'd ever seen in those woods. It had to be twice my height, maybe more. And it wasn't shaped right. Its body looked thin, long, unnatural in proportion. And hanging from its face, or where its face should have been, was a long, trunk-like appendage that reached all the way down to its waist, like an elephant's trunk, except it didn't sway. It didn't move like something alive. It just hung there, heavy and wrong. The figure started marching forward, not walking, marching, mechanical, deliberate. One foot in front of the other, but stiff, unnatural, like it wasn't made to move like a human at all. The worst part, it was just blackness. Not dark clothing, not shadowed skin. It had no color to it. It absorbed light instead of reflecting it, like it wasn't actually there, just a cutout in the shape of something real. I couldn't move at first. My hand trembled on the flashlight, but I didn't lower it. I just watched as it came closer, step by step. Finally, instinct kicked in. I backed away slowly, keeping the light trained on it. My feet found the porch, then the back door. I stepped inside, never taking my eyes off it. And the second I crossed the threshold, I slammed the door shut. Still, I stared through the glass, toward the tree line, toward where I'd last seen it. But it was gone, completely gone. No sound, no movement, nothing but still trees and empty night. I stood there for a long time, my breath coming in sharp, shallow bursts, my hands still shaking. Part of me wanted to run back outside and search to prove that I hadn't seen what I thought I saw. But I didn't move, because somewhere deep inside I knew what I saw wasn't human. To this day, I try to convince myself it was just in my head, a trick of the light, a dream maybe. I was tired, imaginative, too much internet horror, right? But when I close my eyes, I can still see it. That black, towering figure with the trunk-like face, coming straight for me. You can see some weird things when you're tired. But the thing about this story, I wasn't tired. We were on a family vacation at a resort tucked deep in rural Pennsylvania, one of those remote places that feels more like a retirement getaway than a vacation for a couple of teenagers. There weren't many people around my age or my brother's age. No poolside games, no other kids to hang out with. Just long hallways, quiet woods, and that eerie silence that feels like it's pressing in from all sides. It already felt a little off. One afternoon, I stepped out of the main lodge, stretching my legs and taking in the crisp air. I don't know why, but I happened to glance up. Second floor, one of the windows above. And that's when I saw her. A teenage girl, maybe around my age, standing at the window, looking down at me. Her face was mostly still, unreadable, but from the distance, I thought she looked kind of cute. So I gave her a quick wave. She didn't move, didn't wave back, didn't blink, just stared. Okay, weird, but not the end of the world. Maybe she was shy or didn't see me clearly. I shrugged it off and went about the rest of my day. But later that afternoon, boredom had me wandering again. The only real place to sit outside was the tiny playground at the edge of the property. A sad little swing set and a wooden bench, both a little too weathered to be comforting. I sat on the swing, dragging my feet in the dirt. That's when I saw her again. She was standing off in the distance, just past the playground, near the tree line. Same girl, same stillness, just staring at me. I'll be honest, being a teenage guy, my hormones tended to override common sense. So I got off the swing, smoothed my shirt, and started walking toward her. It felt bold in the moment, stupid now, but that's hindsight. The closer I got, the more I realized something was wrong. Her face, what I'd thought was cute from the window, now looked off. I couldn't figure out why at first, but the unease hit me like static in my brain. If I had to pinpoint it, it was the eyes and the mouth. Both were just a little too wide, a little too still, like they were drawn on or trying to mimic what a normal face should look like, but hadn't quite gotten it right. I got maybe halfway to her before she suddenly turned around and ran. Not a skip, not a walk. She took off into the woods at full speed, like a deer bolting at the first sound of a twig snap. I stopped cold. That was it for me. Whatever curiosity I had drained out of me like water through a crack. The way she moved, the way she looked, it didn't feel human. Or at least, not like someone I wanted to chase through a forest. I didn't see her again. Not during the rest of our stay at the resort. Not in the lobby, not by the lodge, not peeking through the windows. It was like she was never really there. I figured that was the end of it. We packed up the next day and hit the road, miles and miles of open highway winding us away from that strange little place. I was sitting in the back seat of the minivan, head leaned against the window, half zoned out and thinking about her, wondering if maybe I'd missed an opportunity. Maybe if I'd followed her, I'd have a story to tell, something wild, even if her face gave me the creeps. That's when my stomach dropped. I looked out the window, just casually scanning the scenery, and there, standing at the tree line, right off the shoulder of the road, was her. The same girl, still, silent, watching me. And as we sped past, I saw her head turn, slowly, locking eyes with me. Even through the tinted windows, even with the blur of the van speeding forward, her stare didn't break. She was looking directly at me. I spun in my seat, eyes wide, and asked, "Did you guys see that girl?" My parents exchanged a confused glance. "See who?" my dad asked. I turned back toward the window, heart thudding in my chest. The tree line was already far behind us, fading into the distance. No one else had seen her. And just like that, I accepted the only explanation that made any kind of sense. She was never really there. At least, not in the way people are supposed to be. I can tell you from experience, sleep paralysis is one of the most terrifying things a person can go through. I was 19 at the time, and unlike most people I knew, I'd already had sleep paralysis, not once or twice, but 3 separate times in my life. Each one was terrifying in its own right, but nothing prepared me for the 4th time. That night was different. That night was something worse than a nightmare. It was something I'd carry with me forever. It started just as the first light of morning crept through my bedroom window. Somehow, my blinds were open, even though I always closed them. A sliver of sunlight spilled in, cutting through the quiet of the room. My eyes opened slowly, adjusting to the light. But that was all I could move. I couldn't lift my head, couldn't shift my arms. My chest rose and fell, shallow and shaky. I was completely paralyzed, locked inside my own body. It was already a hellish feeling, but then I saw her. A little girl was standing by the wall, halfway between the window and the foot of my bed. She was just staring at me. Or at least, I think she was. Because her eyes weren't eyes at all, just black voids. Deep, featureless holes that seemed to pull in the light around them. Her skin was pale, almost sickly gray. Her hair hung in uneven strands around her face, and she didn't move. I wanted to scream, to bolt out of bed, to do anything, but I couldn't even twitch. Then she started walking. Except it wasn't walking, not really. She took giant, exaggerated steps like a puppet with broken joints. Each movement stretched her legs farther than seemed possible, unnaturally long strides that clicked and snapped with each lurch forward. The sound of her feet against the floor was muffled, unnatural, as if the space between us wasn't fully real. She reached my bed and stopped. For a split second, I thought maybe she'd just vanish like a dream. But then she moved. She lunged forward, and suddenly her cold, bony hands were around my throat, tight. She was choking me. And the worst part, I couldn't breathe, not just in the dream, but in real life. My lungs burned, my vision blurred. I could feel the edges of consciousness starting to slip. I couldn't fight her. I couldn't move. I just lay there, trapped, while her lifeless eyes stared down at me and her hands squeezed tighter. I could feel every single finger pressing into my windpipe. It felt like I was dying, like I was actually taking my final breaths, and there was nothing I could do about it. And then, just as everything started going dark, my body jerked. My hands shot upward, completely out of my control, and I accidentally smacked myself in the face. I blinked. She was gone. The room was exactly the same. Same light, same walls, same stillness, but she wasn't there anymore. I was fully awake, gasping for air like I'd just been pulled out from the bottom of a lake. My throat ached, my body trembled. But that wasn't even the scariest part. No, what still haunts me, what makes my skin crawl even now, is remembering it. Remembering that little girl, those hollow eyes, that twisting, jerking movement, her hands closing around my neck, and just watching her hurt me, and being forced to just lie there, feeling it all while completely helpless. You can't understand that fear unless you've been there yourself, when your mind is wide awake, screaming, and your body is nothing more than a cage.